Hi all, we're going to look at another instructive game today. This time is British Grandmaster Nigel Short versus Jan Timman, and the central theme, which I believe this game demonstrates very well, is the king walk. The game almost implies that one should just really play the position, forget about rules sometimes, artificial strategic rules. You know, often one is trying to shelter one's king and not create any weaknesses around there because you don't want to be mated. But actually, you know, it's well known that the king gets stronger and stronger as the game heads towards the end game, because then there's less possibility of being mated. But what about in the middle game as an attacking unit? Let's have a look at this game. E4, knight f6. So Timman plays the Alekhine's defence against Nigel Short. And then Short played e5. So knight d5, d4, d6, all standard Alekhine defence opening theory. White has a comfortable position here, and it's the start, actually, of a very nice plan now. This queen e2 is overprotecting the e5 square. If white can get better pieces than black and run down black's counterplay, then we're starting to create the conditions for outrageous ideas, including a king walk by white. Knight c6 was played, and now Short plays castles, and after castles plays h3 to stop the pin, which is now on. Now a5 was played. Short played a4 to block that a pawn, and he's kind of saying to black, you know, where is your counterplay? Your bishop is blocked in at the moment, and these pieces are not really doing much on the queen side. D takes e5 was played. So black reduces the tension in the centre, but on the other hand, the downside of this move is that later in the game, white actually controlled the d file, and that was used to reduce black's counterplay even more, as we'll see. So d takes e5, knight d4, and off comes one of black's active pieces. Short must have been quite pleased with this, because he can recharge that knight which has just gone by playing now, after rook e1, and e6. So black was worried potentially by white playing e6. Short recharges his knight on f3 by simply playing knight d2, and he's going to gain a nice tempo on the black queen. So knight d5, knight f3, gaining a nice tempo. So white's pieces are getting better than black's. But how does Short get rid of this knight on d5, which is quite annoying? It's protecting this square, for example, which might be useful for Short's later infiltration if he wanted to infiltrate on the dark squares, which is what occurred in the game. He plays queen e4, so it's got multiple ideas. First of all, queen h4, and then this diagonal will be nice, put under pressure. But also white will be then playing perhaps bishop h6 to try and weaken black's king, and also gain access to these dark squares in the black king position, which is creating yet another condition for the central theme of the game, not just squashing black's counterplay, but also having weak squares where the white king can just pop into later. There was also another classic Alekhine's game which had a king walk, which I might do to add to this idea, that in the middle game the king can be an aggressive unit. But we'll see now what happened in this game was queen b4, and so Short's discouraged from playing queen h4 because of queen takes h4. He wants to keep the queens on, and he wants to reduce black's counterplay further. So he plays bishop c4. He's sacrificing his whole queenside pawn structure with this move, because after knight b3 he plays b3. So he doesn't mind the doubled pawns, and also he doesn't mind the isolated pawn. What has he achieved? He's achieved one less active piece from black. So these bishops now are the two pieces which are not really that great. White's pieces are freer. For example, this bishop can come into g5, h6 later if queen h4. This knight can also threaten to knight g5 in some lines, as we'll see. So rook e8 was played, and now rook d1. So white seizes control of that d file. Queen c5, queen h4. So now white's rook and queen are coordinating to add more pressure to the d8 square. White's starting to dominate the position a little bit here. Let's have a quick look at bishop takes e5. If bishop takes e5, white could refute that apparently with bishop a3, according to Ribka. So the black queen will be overloaded protecting that bishop. So black is starting to be tied down, and I'm only going to show you variations to demonstrate that, if absolutely necessary. Black's counterplay is just being systematically reduced, and with this infiltration now, the black rooks show that they're also tied down, and white's threatening in some variations now queen e7. With black's move bishop b7, he is, however, tying down the white knight a bit. The white knight never can move because of queen takes g2 at the moment. So actually, in this position, white's threatening queen e7, and black has to do something about that. He plays bishop g7, so inviting the dark square bishop exchange, something he earlier didn't really want to do, but now he's seemingly compelled to do. So rook 8 d7, and short establishes a rook on the 7th rank. Rook f8 was played, and now short is happy to exchange off these dark squared bishops. So all of a sudden, these dark squares are now potential victims for white's pieces. He plays first rook 1 d4, and after rook a e8, he plays queen f6 check. So the queen is happy to take the outpost on f6. King g8, and look at the rooks. The rooks of white are far superior to the rooks of black. This knight is pinned down, but by the same token, this bishop's pinned down. It can't go and harass this pawn because of knight g5 would be so destructive. Here, white played h4, so he didn't even want to use this rook to come here. Well, it's protecting that rook anyway. So black is prompted now to defend with h5. He doesn't want white playing h5, h6, and then queen g7 mate. And now here we see the most spectacular king walk, probably in modern grandmaster chess. Short plays king h4, and the route is clear now. King g3, f4, g5, and h6, where it will help the white queen deliver mate on g7. So those previously dark squared weaknesses from the bishop exchange are now real targets for the king to help the queen. Black played here rook c8. So he's just looking at this king walk in the eye and thinking, what can I do about this? Short is demonstrating that in this particular position he can break one of the fundamental rules of chess about king safety. He can walk his king right up to the black king. It's almost as if in a game of football the goalkeeper is coming into the attack because the opponents are so on the defensive. All it needs is one more attacking resource, even if it's an outrageous attacking resource. So rook c8, king f4, and how does black defend against the simple idea now of king g5 and king h6? For example, if in this position king h7, then f7 drops, or knight g5 is possible. Knight g5, for example, king g8, and now here, rook takes f7 is crushing. You know, white, it will be all over. So the black, you know, is really in trouble in this position. He plays bishop c8, and short simply ignores it. He plays king g5, just marching his king to h6. And in this position, Jan Timman's had enough. He's resigned in this position. What can he do? It's just mate in 6, according to Rybka. Let's show one example. Just king h7 trying to defend. The f7 pawn goes. And then after that, it's simple. King h6. Mate in 3 now. Desperate computer move. Rook takes d7. Desperate computer move. And just queen f8 mate. So what a spectacular way to win the game with this spectacular king walk on the dark squares. Let's have a quick overview and summary of this game. The main ingredients, the climate Short had created, was crushing the opponent's counterplay, systematically removing the active pieces, leaving himself with far better active pieces, not worrying even about his pawn structure being a wreck on the queen side, because they weren't really real weaknesses, because if the opponent is in such a passive position, then they can't exploit those weaknesses. So what if Short had double pawns? How is black going to exploit these double pawns in this position with such passive minor pieces? Short seizes control of the d-file as well, and he makes his rooks far, far superior to black's. And black is forced to voluntarily give up his dark square bishop, saying to white, yeah, come in with your queen to f6, I can't do anything about it. So he gets his queen to f6, and the outrageous thing now is that although he can't move the knight, he uses an unexpected attacking resource, his king, to walk it potentially to the h6 square. So we see this devastation effect of the king coming in, and after bishop c8 just king g5. I hope you enjoyed that. Please leave any comments on YouTube. Thanks very much.